Hi, I'm Kate with Sallie Tomato, and I am excited to be here to introduce the Mackenzie pattern to you. We are just so excited to be collaborating with a wonderful talent that is NautiPup Designs, and this bag, Mackenzie, was inspired by the artisan craftsmanship of Mackenzie-Childs. And today we're going to go through step by step this wonderful little bag. It's an easy sew, so let's get started. First, review the recommended fabric listed on the back cover of your pattern. Next, gather the supplies you'll need: one main fabric, two contrasting fabrics, a lining fabric, and optional interfacing. You'll also need hardware: two rectangle rings, one slider buckle, and one small magnetic snap. Sallie Tomato has 5 metal finishes to choose from, so you can coordinate your hardware perfectly to your bag. I'm adding a label and tassel cap as extra design elements, but that's also optional. And let's quickly review the tools and notions that we'll use: rotary cutter or scissors, thread such as sulky 40 weight poly deco, which is nice and strong, clover wonder clips or pins, chalk or removable pen, basting tape or glue, a stiletto, a point turning tool, seam roller, zipper foot, Teflon foot, and if you're adding a tassel, you'll want permanent craft glue and a screwdriver as well. Cut out all the pieces you need from each fabric following the pattern instructions. I'm going to be adding a coordinating tassel, which isn't included in the pattern, but you'll have enough fabric left to choose if you'd like to add the tassel. And if you like the look of one of the exterior fabrics for the strap connectors, use that fabric which looks the best. Just keep in mind that the exterior fabric may be thicker and create more bulk for sewing. Finally, cut and fuse your interfacing pieces if you need them. You'll notice that I did not add interfacing. Next, shape the bottom corners of the exterior base piece and the lining interior panel. Let's assemble the hanging pocket first. With right sides together, align all the edges of the lining hanging pocket pieces. Pin or clip the 2 short ends. Set the machine stitch length to 3 mm length, then sew along the short ends with 1/4 inch seam allowances, forming a tube. Then turn the pocket right side out and press the seam edges. Increase the stitch length to 3.5 mm and top stitch 1/8 inch from both short ends. I'm going to add a handmade label positioned just about 1/2 inch above the top stitching on one short edge. I think it's a great addition, especially if I give this bag as a gift. Visit our YouTube channel for a complete video tutorial on installing this hardware. Now fold the top short end of the hanging pocket piece down, and then fold the bottom short end up, overlapping the 2 ends. Refer to your pattern instructions for the exact measurements. Then pin or clip the side edges together. Top stitch 1/8 inch along the 2 overlapping sides. Turn the hanging pocket right side out through the overlap opening, then shape the corners with a turning tool or your fingers and press the folds and seams smooth. Top stitch along the overlapped sides with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, encasing the 1/8 inch seam allowance. With right sides up, center the top fold of the hanging pocket with the top edge of one lining interior piece. The top of the pocket has the overlap. Baste the top fold of the pocket in place with 1/4 inch seam allowance. A basting stitch can be longer than a regular stitch length. It's just used to hold the layers together more permanently than pins. We'll set that part of the lining aside and then make the slip pocket. With right sides together, fold the lining slip pocket piece in half, meeting the shorter edges and aligning the sides. Pin or clip the layers together. Return the stitch length to 3 millimeters and sew the bottom long edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Turn the slip pocket right side out and press both the seam and the fold. Increase the stitch length to 3.5 millimeters and top stitch along the fold with an 1/8 inch allowance. Using chalk or removable pen, mark a vertical line along the center of the slip pocket. Then position the slip pocket on the remaining lining interior panel with right sides up. Align the raw side edges. Baste the slip pocket along the sides with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then top stitch the vertical marked line and top stitch 1/8 from the bottom edge. I'm actually stitching the vertical division as I'm top stitching the bottom edge, just to save a little time. We're ready to begin assembling the exterior panels. With right sides up, position one contrast border piece on each main middle panel, aligning the top raw edges. Secure the layers with sewing clips. Top stitch each long edge of the border piece with 1/8 inch allowance. With right sides together, center one contrast top piece to the top of each border edge. Sew together with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Fold the top piece away from the border, pressing the seams with your fingers or a seam ruler. Top stitch a 1/4 inch from the seam. With right sides together, align the long top edge of the contrast base pieces along the bottom edge of each exterior panel. Sew together with 3/8 inch seam allowances. Finger press the seams open, and then we're back to the machine. Top stitch along both sides of the seam with 1/4 inch allowance. Now let's get back to the lining assembly. With right sides together, align one long edge of the lining facing to the top long edge of each lining interior panel. Sew together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. This wider seam allowance in the lining will allow it to fit smoothly inside your bag. Okay, now press the facing away from the lining. Top stitch on the facing a 1/4 inch from the seam. Insert 1/2 of the magnetic snap centered on each facing. Fuse a small scrap of interfacing over the wrong side of the snap to protect your fabric from the metal prong edges. Be sure to review our YouTube channel for detailed video tutorials for installing the magnetic hardware. With right sides together, align the lining panels together along the straight bottom edge and secure with sewing clips. Sew the lining panels together along the straight bottom edge with 5/8 inch seam allowance, leaving an opening in the middle unsewn for a turning opening. Press the seam open. Now, keeping right sides together, align the top and side edges of the lining. Pin or clip the layers securely. Start sewing with 3/8 inch seam allowance at the top of each side and gradually increase to a 5/8 seam allowance as you reach the bottom edge. By increasing the seam allowance, your lining will be slightly smaller than the exterior and it will fit neatly inside your bag. I also love the soft tip of this particular stiletto. It holds the seam allowances flat as they move under the presser foot. Trim the seam allowances to 1/4 inch wide and finger press the seams open. Match the bottom raw edge and the side raw edges, right sides together at the corners. Sew together with a 5/8 inch seam allowance to create the box corners. Make sure to backstitch at the beginning and end of those two seams. Trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch wide. And we're ready to prepare the strap connectors. Fold the long edges of the connector piece to the center, wrong sides together. Top stitch each long edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Cut the connector piece into 2 smaller pieces. Slide one rectangle ring over the end of each connector piece, then fold each connector in half, wrong sides together, meeting the short ends. Top stitch about 1/2 inch from the fold. Try using a zipper or narrow foot to easily sew near the hardware. Okay, let's dig into the bag assembly. Place the exterior panels right sides together, aligning the bottom edges and securing that edge with sewing clips. Sew the bottom seam with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Press the seam open and top stitch a 1/4 inch from each side of the seam. Now align the top and sides of the exterior with right sides together. Sew each side with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Trim the seam allowances to 1/4 inch wide. Next, match the bottom raw edge and the side raw edge at each corner and clip the layers together. Complete the boxed corners by sewing each corner together with a 3/8 inch seam. Remember to backstitch at the beginning and end to secure the stitches. Trim the seam allowances to a 1/4 inch wide. Then press the seam allowances open and center each strap connector over an exterior seam right sides together and align the raw edges. The ring of the strap connector should be down. Use wonder clips to hold the connectors in place and then slip the lining into the exterior bag right sides together, aligning side seams and top raw edges. Hold all the layers together with sewing clips. Now sew around the top edge with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Turn the bag right side out through the opening in the lining, gently pushing the corners out to shape them. Top stitch the opening in the lining closed with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Smooth the lining to the inside of the bag and then finger press the top edge and add a few sewing clips to secure it. Top stitch the edge with a 1/4 inch allowance. Now we're going to work on the adjustable strap for Mackenzie. Join the 2 adjustable strap pieces by placing the short ends right sides together, perpendicular to each other, and overlapping the ends. Sew a diagonal seam from corner to corner. Trim the excess seam allowance to 1/4 inch wide, then press the seam open with your fingers. Top stitch along each side of the seam with an 1/8 inch allowance. With wrong sides together, fold the adjustable strap piece in half lengthwise, keeping the raw edges even. Hold the layers together with sewing clips. Top stitch an 1/8 inch from each long side of the strap. Thread one end of the strap over the center bar of the slider buckle. Fold the end under about 1 inch onto itself. Top stitch across the end to secure it. Now thread the opposite strap end without the buckle through a rectangle ring. Next, thread the end over the center bar of the buckle and bring the end through the remaining rectangle ring. Fold up about 1 inch of the end to the underside. Make sure there are no twists in your strap before going to the sewing machine. Top stitch the end of the strap to itself. I think Mackenzie would look great with a tassel, so let's make one from a bit of fabric left over from the bag. First we'll mark a horizontal line near the top of our tassel piece, and then mark vertical cutting lines spaced a 1/4 inch apart. Cut the fringe following the vertical lines, stopping at the horizontal mark. Now tightly wrap and glue the tassel piece to itself. Then insert the tassel into the tassel cap hardware with a bit of permanent glue. Explore our YouTube channel to view more detailed video tutorials of how to make the tassels. And your Mackenzie bag is finished. I had so much fun. I hope you did too. Be sure to share photos with us at #SallieTomato and #Mackenzie-Pattern. We really had fun working in collaboration with NautiPup Designs, and I hope you enjoy their pattern. So keep sewing. Thanks.